And good evening, everybody. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. How's everybody?
Okay.
Good. That opening video was of two places that a lot of people here are familiar with. The stream footage was a Big Darby Creek after we had some heavy rains last year. And the other scene was the waterfall at Old Man's Cave. So I thought those would be nice to throw in there. Christy is not with us this evening. Her husband had to have an operation late this afternoon. And at the time we were getting ready to kick off here, he was just being wheeled out of surgery and into recovery. So I don't think she will pop in at all. So I am going to jump in on her presentation, and hopefully I do okay with this. This is a topic that she knows a lot more about than I do. And before we get into that, I do have two announcements. First, and I made these last week, on April 7th, from 5 to 9 p.m., the Ohio Wildlife Center in Powell is having its annual Wild Night. And this will be live there at the facility. The last 2 years, they've had to do it online, which wasn't quite as good. So if you go, you can get to see all of the animals that they have there, and some of them they will actually have out of their enclosures, like some of the raptors that they, have trained to work with a person. And they have a silent auction, which always has some really good things in it. This is their one and only fundraiser for the year, and it's really important to them because they do not get any government funding for what they do. It's all through donation. So if you're able to, please go. The second thing is April 9th, the Saturday after Wild Night, at High Banks Metro Park is their annual egg extravaganza. And this is a family-oriented event that starts, I believe, at like 11 o'clock and goes until 5. I'll have to nail down the time for everybody. They have a number of things going on. They have special exhibits in the Nature Center. ODNR will be there with a special exhibit on eagles' nests, in which they have live eagles, bald eagles. They have Easter egg hunts for the kids. They have games for the kids and family games. Just a whole bunch of stuff like that that is really good, and a lot of it is nature oriented. It is all family oriented, and it's the most popular park out of Metro Parks because of everything you can see on the trails, and I mean, it's a lot. There are geological things of interest to see on the trails, untouched areas of the Olentangy. There are a lot of areas that are very thick with bird population, And even right near behind the nature center right now, there are, if you go to the observation platform, the place is just overrun with bluebirds, and they're so pretty to see and watch. So keep those two things in mind. Oh, and Linda's here. We will let Linda in, I guess. If my mouse works right, there we go. Hello, Linda. Okay, so we will dive into this. And like I said, this is Christy's presentation, and she is much more knowledgeable on this than what I am. So I will do my best. And if there are any questions you have that I don't have the answers for, I will certainly get them for next time. So our topic tonight is hibernation and dormancy, which is something that is going to end very shortly for the animals that this involves. Now, there are three types of hibernation. First of all, there's true hibernation, what we think of when we hear the word. There is something called brumation, and there is torpor. Now, true hibernation, what happens with these animals when they go into hibernation is their body temperature lowers significantly, their metabolic rate slows, and their heart rate slows considerably. They will not wake up for noises or being touched, or if they're even moved. And some animals go through what is called obligate hibernation, which is annual. It's based on the time of year, and it's not necessarily dependent on the temperature and food access. It's based on the seasonal changes. And then there is facultative hibernation, which is triggered on the opposite of the obligate, triggered with food deprivation, cold temperatures, and environmental changes, such as water sources freezing, for example. Then brumation is something different. This is what happens with cold-blooded animals, which is, we know cold-blooded animals are, cold-blooded's kind of an inaccurate name for them. They are ectotherms, which means that they require external heat sources in order for their internal body functions to work. So, you know, the best example is you and I can be outside in the cold and eat a hot meal, or even just not a hot meal, just eat a meal. And our body will take the fat and the nutrition in that meal and turn it into body heat. That does not work for these animals. After they eat a meal, they have to find a source of warmth. If they don't, they cannot digest, their body will not digest the meal. So a snake, for example, if it eats a mouse and it cannot find a source of warmth, the mouse just sits in its stomach and it can start rotting in its stomach, and it can make it very sick or even kill it. So they are ectotherms. And their brumation starts with shorter daylight hours and colder weather. They are attuned to that. They, during brumation, have wake cycles, which they use to drink water and move around slowly as they do that before they return to sleep. They don't defecate. The brumation can last for several months. And in the instance of the Blandings turtle, which if you're not familiar with them, the Blandings turtle only lives in the swamp areas around the southern shore of Lake Erie. It's the only place in the world that they're found. If you go to McGee Marsh, they have a population that's quite large. And the way you can tell them, first of all, they have a dark shell like the one you see in the picture here. And it's hard to see in this picture. They have white spots in the middle of each of their plates. And they have this yellow to cream colored underside of their chin and their throat. And they are endangered in most of their range. They are a species of concern. They do not show signs of aging, and they are omnivores. And they can reproduce into their 80s and 90s. And yes, they live that long. They can live to be 100 years old. So Blandings turtles are one of the main ones that goes into brumation, as do leopard frogs. And leopard frogs are the brightly colored frogs that you see in ponds or wetlands that have, it's a real bright green with the darker brown spots. Now, torpor is something a little different. With torpor, these animals get a reduced body temperature, not quite the same as what you see in hibernation, and the same with a lower metabolic rate, but not quite the same as what you see in hibernation because they're still active. It's just reduced, slower activity. These creatures will move around slower than what they normally would. And this is a response to lower food supply for them during the winter. And it's dependent on the food source. It can last days or weeks. And this does allow them to survive through what would otherwise be mass extinctions. Daily torpors, when they last just a day, typically happen at night, and it's done to conserve energy. And it can be any time of the year. It's not necessarily seasonal. Some species that go through this actually are hummingbirds, bats, rodents, and marsupials, which are marsupial that we have is the possum. Now, there is torpor research for humans. For example, NASA is exploring torpor as a deep sleep option for a mission to Mars. Although to do that, actually to induce that on astronauts is not yet decided. In 2013, a company called SpaceWorks Engineering began researching a way to dramatically cut the cost of a human expedition to Mars by putting the crew in extended torpor for 90 to 180 days. Traveling while going through this type of hibernation would reduce the astronauts' metabolic functions and minimize their requirements for life support. In other words, oxygen and food during multi-year missions. kind of the stuff you see in sci-fi movies, right? Sci-fi space movies. It involves lowering the body temperature artificially, sedation, and monitoring and lowering the nutrition and hydration intake. So now here are some more definitions to throw into the mix. There is seasonal hibernation, usually winter, but there are some exceptions, which we will talk about in a few minutes. There is torpor or dormant state where body conditions change to metabolic depression, which we will talk about as well. Now there is heterothermy, in which there is a slower respiration rate, slower breathing rate, slower heart rate, and lower body temperature. And this type of hibernation can last days, weeks, or months. It is something that happens with true hibernators, as opposed to creatures who, with these functions, just take a long nap. True hibernators cannot be wakened if in that state. The ones that just kind of take a long nap, they can be. Now a bear is shown here. Bears are true hibernators. The old saying is don't poke the bear, but when they are in true hibernation, they won't wake up if they're poked, even if they're moved, like we mentioned. And the question of why, well, there's less food and water available. So this conserves energy for the animal. Actually, they do that through a lower metabolism when food is not available or not nearly as available. It's a response to cold, harsh conditions, not just cold, but the snow, the ice, again, the freezing of water sources, cold winds, freezing rains. It's these creatures, this is their way of dealing with a leave it or deal with it situation. Either you migrate or you adapt. And these creatures choose to adapt, and they do that through hibernation or brumation or torpor. And there are physical changes that go along with, and some of this you know already. Pre-hibernation, animals put on extra body fat for energy reserves. And that's not just animals that go into hibernation. Pretty much all animals do that. Deer are active all year round. They don't slow down. Their metabolism doesn't slow down. But you see how they fatten up if you watch them. If you're a deer watcher, you see how they fatten up in the fall.
And change their color.
They do, yes. They change their color as part of their camouflage scheme. So these hibernators also prepare a shelter, and some store food in their nests or dens or burrows. And again, their body temperature drops dramatically. In that way, they burn their body's fat reserves a lot slower. And along with that, their heart rate drops dramatically. And again, that's expenditure of energy. If your heart's not beating as fast, you're not breathing as fast, so you're not using up body fat as quickly. Now, what animals don't hibernate? We'll take a look at that. Some rodents hibernate and some don't. Muskrats, beavers, tree squirrels, mice, and voles do not. Squirrels stay in their dens and just forage less. Sometimes they share dens to keep warm. They are homotherms, which means their body stays a constant temperature all the time. Skunks enter their dens and go into torpor. They sleep most of the time and they eat very little. Raccoons, now they go into their dens and they can stay there and sleep for up to a month at a time, after which they wake up, and even if they're moving a little slow, which they usually are, they have to forage. Now possums do not. They will go out and search food all winter. The problem they face is they do not have super thick coats, no matter how they look. So they can get hyperthermia. And especially a problem for them is their feet, because they do not have fur on their feet. So they often get frostbitten feet.
So that could be the reason why I found a dead one in the woods today.
Yeah, it could very well be. Yeah. If it's, well, yeah, you know how it is with people. If it's not, you get frostbite on an extremity, and if it doesn't get treatment, you know, it literally can fall off, or it can cause you gangrene, and you know that can kill you pretty quick. So yeah.
Oh, okay.
Then the ectothermic animals that we talked about, they can't hibernate because, again, they can't regulate their body temperature or slow their metabolism. So we're talking about reptiles and amphibians, and we're also talking about fish. Some go into brumation as temperatures drop and the days are short, which is a dormancy, which is not full hibernation, but they slow down to keep warm and conserve energy. They barely eat, drink, or move, don't defecate, and some will go underground or hide in rocks. Turtles, for example, do not hibernate, but their body functions slow down, and they find some place to hide. Catfish, as I think a lot of people are aware, find a mud hole to get into, and they get in there, and you know, they pretty much don't do much of anything until the water temperatures warm up. Now birds, we know birds don't hibernate. Some can go into torpor with a lower metabolism in place until conditions improve. Some stay all winter, others, lots of them, migrate. Now, an interesting fact is polar bears do not hibernate. Pregnant polar bears will go into a den, but the heart rate does not slow down because she has to be able to keep the cubs in her belly warm. She doesn't eat, but her fat reserves deplete as she internally feeds those unborn cubs. And then, as we know, wolves, deer, coyotes, elk, moose, they do not hibernate. They're active all winter. But again, they beef up their bodies as fall rolls around. Now, a look at rodents. In an article published in Nature magazine about what triggers rodent hibernation, it had been found that when animals drop their body temperature and slow their metabolism to hibernate, there is a group of neurons at the base of the brain that most likely pulls the string, in other words, causes that to happen. That was the result of 2 rodent studies. There was one team of researchers that kept mice in a cold environment without food to induce torpor, which again is a kind of a short period of suspended animation. The researchers then identified a set of neurons in a regulatory brain region called the hypothalamus, which you've probably heard of before, that could later be reactivated electrically, actually, to send the mice back into that state. Another team unexpectedly found it could induce a prolonged state of torpor in mice and rats by stimulating those hypothalamus cells, expressing this long name, peptide, which is a chemical in the brain. The next steps are to gauge the overlap between the 2 sets of neurons and figure out how exactly they act together to quiet the body she has. It's actually to put them in and out of this state. So other rodents, chipmunks. Chipmunks make dens. They burrow underground up to 3 feet deep, usually under porches, under roots, under big rocks to protect themselves from predators. They stuff their cheeks full of nuts and seeds, and then they empty them in their burrows. Now their body temperature, this is wild, drops from 100 degrees Fahrenheit, warmer than our average body temperature, to more than half, 40 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's more than what half our normal body temperature would be. That's a huge drop. And they will wake up occasionally while they're in that state to eat some of the food that they brought into their burrow. And groundhogs, even more crazy. You know, the average human heart rate is like between 98 and 120 beats per minute, somewhere around in there. Well, groundhogs, their normal rate's 160, higher than ours, and they slow it down during torpor to 4 beats per minute. They based on heartbeat alone are just barely alive when they are in this state. And that's how they live the whole winter, you know, the 6 months or whatever of it, without burning up all the fat reserves that they accumulated in the fall. It's just amazing. So cold-blooded animals, which again, ectotherms, they have amazing adaptations. There are certain types of frogs and toads can actually freeze solid and survive. Their body creates, and I've talked about this on other programs, talk about it when we did our program on reptiles and amphibians. Their body creates and releases a type of antifreeze into their cells, and it is capable of freezing, and then once the weather gets warmer, thaws without breaking the cells or shattering the cells. So they're able to do that. Others have a protein type substance in the body, some fish, reptiles, and amphibians that can do the same thing. Snakes sometimes form balls together, or they are called nests at times for warmth in the hibernaculum, their den. And they do this starting in late autumn, and they stay there all winter. Insects, they don't technically hibernate, but they can go into a dormant state.
Oh,
Now, many butterflies and moths we know spend the winter in larval or pupal stages or pupa stages. I think we all know the basics of that. The one, and that's, you know, the ones like not monarchs that actually migrate thousands of miles. Bumblebees, the whole colony dies out every winter, and the new queen can hibernate for as long as 9 months. That's the queen that has hatched in the fall. So she can hibernate for as long as 9 months, which is 75% of her life. Then in the spring, she rebuilds the colony, lays tons of eggs that hatch. And she nests in several places. And she lays eggs for males, worker bees, and new queens. So she'll start several new colonies. Now, the consequences of hibernation. With these animals, they undergo during hibernation, especially true hibernation, a 25% or more loss in weight. They have a high predation risk, except of course, you know, somebody like a bear, which the only animal probably that's going to try and go after a hibernating bear would be a wolf. Most animals aren't going to mess with them. But for all the other ones, there's this predation risk during hibernation, and when they first emerge from hibernation, because they're weak. They're still trying to rev up their metabolism. They're slower than normal. And if they have not stored up enough energy as fat, they may not even wake up at all. They can die during hibernation, because when they are hibernating, there's no way to replenish their energy reserves. Juveniles, and you may have heard about this before, juveniles in the spring, early spring, that were born prior to then, closer to the harsh weather time, they're at risk because they basically don't have any energy reserves, and they have little time or experience then to learn how to properly forage and build up energy reserves. You know, they just don't get to learn in time. So, some myths and facts. Hibernation is not the same thing as sleep. That should kind of be clear from what we've talked about. Animals are not completely still during hibernation, just like we're not completely still when we sleep at night. They do move around. They do snack. They do go to the bathroom, the ones that are, you know, in true hibernation, and they do give birth during hibernation. Not all animals hibernate the same way. Hibernating, this is interesting. Hibernating animals do not dream. Isn't that something? But yeah, you know, you think about us, you do move around in your sleep, and you know, you do. You might fall asleep on your back and you wake up on your right side, and you do know a lot of people, at times you get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom or to get a drink or whatever. And these animals do the same thing. Now, some oddities and other things. Echinitas in Australia can go into torpor after a wildfire. And that is on account of their food supply being greatly damaged and shortened. Hibernation, when it is too hot or too dry, which happens in other places, not here, but in other places, is called estivation. Some creatures like the lungfish, who estivates, burrows into the mud of riverbanks, and that allows them to stay cool and moist for up to 2 years after a water source has disappeared. And lungfish, if I remember right, are mainly in Africa. And then we've heard about this. Falling lizard alerts in Florida are sometimes in the news. They lose their grip on tree branches when temperatures drop because they can't move below at about 45 degrees. And they have the iguanas there. They have chameleons. Same thing happens to them. And then again, these cold-blooded species like reptiles don't regulate their body temperature the same way as mammals. In fact, they cannot regulate it at all. To adapt to temperature changes, they brumate. So snakes, frogs, and turtles dig underground or into the muck under the water to keep warm. That's the only source of any kind of warmth they can find during cold weather. And they come out when the sun is out and temperatures rise. Under the surface of the ground is a big deal for the ectotherms, because again, we all know even during the depths of winter, 2-3 feet down under the surface of the ground, it's fairly warm. You know, the temperatures remain like in the 50s. And that's exactly what they need. Okay, so that's it for that. Let me see here. Let me stop sharing that. And here I am back again. And oh, good. We have 7:42, and we have time for an excellent nature trivia. Who's up for that? I got some.
Sure.
I got some really good questions this time. Let me pull that up. Where is it? Here it is. Okay, nature trivia. And this is a great blue heron that this is a fuzzy photo because it expanded so large, but this is a great blue heron that I photoed at Twin Lakes actually 2 years ago. And I am going to expand this up like a slideshow too. Here we go. So, number one, what is the only swan native to Ohio? The only swan native to Ohio, is it the trumpeter swan, the tundra swan, or the mute swan?
Tundra.
And who said that?
Carolyn.
Okay. Carolyn, you are right. And a lot of people might not think that because of just the word tundra in the association, but that's our native. And then of course the alternate answer, swan cleaners. Swan cleaners serving the Columbus area for what, 45 years or something. Okay, very good. Question number 2, and we have 4 tonight. A snake begins to shed by rubbing its head, A, against its body, B, against the ground, C, on a sharp stick, or D, on a tree trunk.
Hmm. Hmm.
I'm gonna guess it's body. I don't know.
Yeah, body is what I was thinking.
Okay, anybody else? The correct answer is against the ground.
Hmm.
That bit of information actually came from Ohio History Central from their website.
Hmm.
So it starts by rubbing its head against the ground until it has got a sort of a collar, if you will, peeled back off of its head. And then it works it off from there by rubbing against something other than the ground.
Hmm.
But it starts by rubbing its head along the ground.
Hmm.
The thing I can tell you too from personal experience about this is, snakes, when they shed, they don't just shed the skin on their head and their body. They also shed the skin on the outside of their eyes.
Hmm.
So when a snake is getting ready, when they are, and this happens late, when they are within, say, 3 days of shedding, their eyes become very milky gray looking.
Hmm.
And you know what? When this happens, they become pretty crabby too. When their eyes are like that, they do not like to be handled. They do not like to be picked up. They do not like to be messed with. They just want to be left alone until that's off of their eyes.
I found one once hanging on the edge of a gutter, and that was really weird. But it was the skin, and I just figured, well, maybe a bird picked it up. And then I was hoping it wasn't that this thing was kind of living up in the gutter or anything.
Yeah. They quite often like to be like suspended up from something. Like last year when I found the baby gray rat snake on the Ohio Wildlife Center property, it was hanging from a sidewalk lighting fixture that was about 6 foot off the ground. And I have heard that both the gray rat snake and the bull snakes like to hang in trees and then drop onto their prey when they see it. Okay, so next question. What native Ohio insect, and we're talking butterflies here, is on the endangered species list? Is it A, the monarch butterfly, B, the McGee marsh butterfly, C, the Carner blue butterfly, or D, the swamp tippy butterfly?
I'm gonna go with the monarch.
And this picture, by the way, is none of those. Okay, and anybody else?
Hmm.
I just, I don't think I saw one monarch on my property last year at all. And it just seems like every year they've dwindled and dwindled, but
Yeah, they are having that problem. Yes. I only saw a couple, and the aggravating stupid thing is I read like 2 months ago that they are to be put on the endangered species list federally,
Hmm.
but they have not been put on because there are a whole bunch of species in line ahead of them for the paperwork processing for that.
well, you know what? That is just plain stupid.
It is. It is. That's the only reason they are not actually technically considered an endangered species, because paperwork hasn't been processed yet, and there's a bunch of other creatures in line ahead of them.
Hmm.
It's like, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah, really.
So our answer is the Carner blue.
Oh, I saw lots of those last year.
The monarch butterfly, again, is not native to Ohio. They come from South America and Central America. And I threw you a curve there. There's no such thing as a McGee marsh butterfly or a swamp tippy butterfly. The correct answer is a Carner blue butterfly, and they actually look like this one, except that instead of that fuchsia color on the wings, it's like an azure blue. They're really actually very pretty. Okay, and then our final question, and this is another cold-blooded question. The Lazarus lizard, which is not native to here, but we have them here. The Lazarus lizard is named after the biblical character. A,
Yeah.
true, B, false.
Yeah, B.
Yeah, I would say B too.
Okay, who else said B? I know, Linda, you did.
Yeah.
And who else?
Carolyn.
Carolyn, okay. This is real interesting. Yes, it is false. The lizard is named for Fred Lazarus III because his stepson decided to bring some back through customs after visiting Europe.
Hmm.
Lazarus lizards are, although they're everywhere in Ohio, they are mainly in Cincinnati because that is where the family released them. The climate there is very similar to that of their native Italian home.
Hmm.
Is that the famous Lazarus? I mean, Columbus, the people that had the Lazarus store in Columbus?
You know, I don't know. I got this information on az-z animals.com, and it didn't say if he was that Lazarus or not.
Hmm. Hmm.
Interesting.
But the boy named him after got to name them here.
Uh-huh.
Not scientifically, but got to give them their common name here, and he named them after his stepfather.
Hmm.
Okay. That's all the questions I have. I tried to make those a little better than our run-of-the-mill trivia questions.
Hmm.
Does anybody have any questions or comments on anything before we end the session for the evening?
I do have a question. With
Yeah.
the days getting longer, is there any way we can spring ahead here too to 8 o'clock?
Move our time to 8 o'clock? I think we could probably work that out. Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm outside until it gets dark and
Yeah. Yeah, I think we could do that. When do we go do the time change?
Weekend. This weekend.
Oh my gosh, is it this weekend?
Yep.
Oh my gosh.
Wow. I'll talk to Christy about that, but I'm pretty sure she'll be willing to go along with it.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Well, you know what, and it would be a bit be better for me too, because doing the programs for homeschoolers for me is really starting to expand.
Well, I get engrossed in the garden or out in the woods and
Yeah.
until
Yep.
dark.
Yes, I'm going to be out more too. Even though it was kind of coldish today, I was outside doing projects, not gardening. I was out doing projects. So yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, I will talk to Christy about that, and I will let everybody know probably through our Facebook page.
Thank you.
Sure.
Great.
No problem.
Today's was a really good session too, Don. But
Thank you.
you know, last week Christy mentioned seeing all these eagles, and what park was she at, or do you remember?
I do not. If I think about it for a while, I'll remember it, but right off the top of my head, I don't.
Okay. Well, I'll try and remember to ask her next week or whatever.
Well,
Or you can go on the YouTube and
I will
look at-
ask her. I will talk to her tomorrow about that. I will ask her, and I will actually post that on the Facebook page as well.
Great.
Oh, great. Okay, I forgot all about YouTube. Yeah, you're right. Could go there.
Yeah, I'll post that on the Facebook page. Okay.
Hey,
Great.
thank you.
Yes, and I don't know if you've looked or not. I'll just mention real quick that if anybody has nieces, nephews, grandkids, anything like that, that they would like to partake of some of this, I have started recording the sessions I'm doing for the homeschoolers.
Ooh.
And they are the same programs I am doing for all of you, except that they are tailored down to the level of kids that are grades 2 through 5.
Cool.
So, and I am recording those, and I'm getting some pretty good response on those.
Well, at my age, maybe I understand it better.
No, I just, I thought I would mention it because you never know.
Mhm.
People
Yeah.
might not go onto the YouTube channel looking for that. And it is, is starting to show up there.
Cool.
Okay, well, I am going to end the session for this evening then. Everybody have a good night. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And Christy and I will both be back next week, perhaps at 8 o'clock. Okay.
Good night.
Okay.
All right, everybody have a good weekend.
Thank you. You too.
Yeah, you bet. Bye-bye.
Bye.